Hello sir, I'll be explaining about the first lab exercise in the network protocol law. The first exercise is to configure and log into an Cisco router and introduction to the basic user interfaces and basic commands. To implement the first lab exercise, I'm going to be using Cisco Packet Tracer from the Cisco products. Before moving on to the Cisco Packet Tracer, I would like to provide the topology of how the configuration of the information is going to be about. So, to ensure that two different networks are having a communication and an IP configuration establishment, we are going to establish two different networks out here. So, for the first network, I'm going to include two different PCs which are connected to the switch. From the switch, I'm connecting them to the router. I'm ensuring that there is a switch here to ensure any intra-network connectivity, if there is any packet that needs to be sent out, which will then pass on to the router. Similarly, for the second network, I'm going to be using a router, a switch followed by the servers. Here, instead of using PC to PC communication, I'm trying to establish a connection from a PC to the server. I'll be connecting to the server of Cisco Packet Tracer using the web host. So we'll move on to the Cisco Packet Tracer and how to do it. Now for the first Cisco Packet Tracer, we need to establish the end devices. Here, we will have end devices as two different PCs followed by two different servers. Now, after establishing the end devices, we'll move on to the routers and switches. As I said, first I will try to establish the switch, which is the 2960, the basic switch here, for the first network and then the second network, followed by the router. I'm going to pick in 1941, the basic router. This is taken to ensure that two serial ports are available for communication between two different networks. After providing the physical entities, now it's time for the logical connection. For logical connection, I'm going to do an automatic connectivity. Basically, these are all connected through in copper direct through. So from the PC to the switch, from the first PC to the second switch, server 0 to the switch, followed by server 1 to the switch. As it is visible when the configuration is being made, it will be in amber. Once the configuration is established, this will turn into green. Now from the switch, it will get connected to the router 1 and from here switch to the router. Now, before I move on to connect two routers, we need to ensure that the router is having the proper configuration. To do that, click on the router. As visible, both the interface cards are empty. So, I need to switch off the router first. Ensure that there is a proper network interface card here. So, I'm going to use in 2T, which is the high serial, high speed WAN interface card. Now, switch on the router. Similarly, repeat this for router 1. Switch off the router, ensure that the network interface card goes in, and then switch on the router. We'll provide some cooling period for the configuration to happen out, and then we'll establish a connection between both the routers to ensure that there is an interconnectivity network which is happening out. So as of now, as it is visible, this will be the network 1 and this will be the network 2, which we are configuring and having a connection. So from here, router 0 to router 1. Now that the connection is established, we have to assign IP configuration to ensure that each and every entity in the network has a unique address. So to do that, first clicking on the PC, desktop, and then IP configuration. For the IP, I'm going to be assigning the family as 192.168.2.101. The subnet mask will get auto-updated. The default gateway, I'm not going to be updating here now, but we will do this after configuring the router IP address. This is basically the router's IP address which needs to be configured there. Repeat the process for PC1. 192.168.2.12. Subnet mask will get auto updated. Now similarly for server 1, as I said, For server, I'm trying to connect it to the Cisco Packet Tracer hostname. So that will be 192.168.1.1. Now for server 1, it is IP configuration is 192.168.1.2. Now moving on to router's IP configuration. Firstly, we need to switch on the Ethernet always as on, so that without the manual intervention, the router should not go down. 192.168.2.1. The gigabit Ethernet will have the same family as that of the PCs out. Subnet mask will get auto updated. Now going on to the serial. This is where the inter-network connectivity is going to be established. So the IP address here will ensure that there isn't separate masking. Switch on always. Now the router IP is configured. Moving on to the next IP. Switch on always. IP4 will be as 192.168.1.101. Similarly for serial now, it's 192.168.3.2. And I ensure that always on is ready. After configuring the routers, what we need to do is configure the routing table. Routing table will ensure that proper next destination of the hop addresses are available to the router altogether. So that will be as 192.168.1.0. I'm providing it as 1.0 to ensure that whatever devices that is getting connected later on need not be reconfigured here again. So the family name of 192.168.1 will ensure that all the other IP addresses which has the same topology will get connected automatically. Is 192.168.3.2. Add it. Similarly for router 1, static IP, I need to give the generic IP address will be provided, followed by the next hop. Next hop will be your router 0's configuration. So we're done with the routing, we're done with the IP configuration. The next part is to ensure that the PCs have the router's information. For that, so the default gateway, the gateway is the place where the packets will be identified where to go. So that we need to provide the IP address that we will assign to the router. So that will be as 192.168.2.1 for the PC. The PC1 Similarly, I'm going to be doing it for the servers. The default gateway will have to be updated with the router's IP address. So that will be as 192.168.1.101 for the server, since we configured the router 1 as 101. Now the IP configuration and the basic information has been programmed to the end entities. So now we need to test whether there is a connection that has been established between the PC and the server. So that will ensure that two different networks are connected in this way. To do that, I'm going to open the web browser of the PC1. So that will be 192.168.1.1. As visible, Cisco Packet Tracer's web address has now been enabled successfully. So we are able to establish a connection between two different networks using the Cisco Packet Tracer. Thank you.